Sure. Shoot.
Let's be friends?
Friends.
Yeah, right.
You're the best.
Yep, okay.
You're stressing me out. What?
Is this how it's supposed to be?
Why is this so difficult?
What can I do to make things better?
Marriage?
Sorry.
No. I'm sorry.
We're in this together.
Relationships
are
complicated.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk.
Well, hey, welcome to First Church. So glad you guys are here today. If you're new, my name's Chad. Welcome. In addition to this great crowd that we have on site, I know we have a whole bunch of people joining us online, like Gracie and Dave and the Long family and Monica and a whole bunch of others. So if you are here on site, would you put your hands together, get loud, welcome in those who are worshiping with us online. And today is a special day because we have a guest speaker who I'm going to introduce here in just a second as he kicks off today our new relationship series. But before I do, I think we need to celebrate something. The book of Psalms talks about how God does incredible stuff and is marvelous in our eyes. And that's how I feel after last weekend. We had an awesome, incredible worship experience last Easter. And just to let you know something, if you didn't get the email this week, in our history, we have never had over 3,000 people attend worship at one setting. But we had this past Easter, over all of our services, 3,371 people worship with us. That's just incredible. The largest attendance in the 117-year history of our church, but it's not just about numbers. I mean, those are people who got to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus and maybe even hear the gospel for the very first time. But also we heard tons of stories and there were baptisms. It was just an incredible weekend, from our Good Friday service to hood hunts to what we did here in our worship services. And so in case you missed it, here's a quick highlight video. Take a look. All right, yeah, you can clap for that. That's awesome. Well, we know that the resurrection of Jesus is not just an event that we celebrate once a year. It is our way of life. And we know, because Jesus is alive, that he can restore life into anything. And that's why this series that we're launching today is so important. Because many of our relationships, they struggle at times. They're even broken at times. Some people may even say that they're dead. But Jesus can breathe new life into what's dead. And so we're going to kick off our new series today with a guest speaker. His name is Rusty George. Rusty is a nationally known speaker. He's a Christian author. In fact, some of his books are available out at the hub today. You can stop and pick them up and you can purchase them. He's going to be out there after services. Be happy to sign a copy of one of his books if you want him to do that. But Rusty has preached for years at Real Life Church in California. He's recently transitioned to Crossroads Christian Church in Grand Prairie, Texas. And like I said, you are going to be blessed by what he's going to say today. But I just have to say, so you know his character, he is a genuine guy. I got to know Rusty at different leadership conferences that I've gone to over the past few years. And when I first started here at First Church, I would go to these leadership conferences for, bigger church ministers, whatever. And I felt out of place and I didn't know a whole lot of people. And I was the new guy. And Rusty was one of those guys, even though he was at a much bigger church than ours, that would come over and talk to me and just welcome me, make me feel right at home. He has sent me text messages over the years. He sent me cards, notes in the mail. And he's just always been such an encouragement when he didn't have to. He didn't even really know me, but he chose to do that because that's just the type of guy he is. And so he's a genuine guy who's going to bring us an awesome message from God's word this morning. And I can't wait for you to get to hear him. So let's give a warm, loud First Church welcome for Rusty George.
Thanks, man. Hey, well, thanks, Chad. It's such an honor to be here. I've been such a big fan of your church for so long for many reasons. One is because I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, at a church called Countryside Christian Church, and our youth group would go with your youth group and several other churches to Youthquake every summer. And some of the most pivotal moments of my life happened out there in Colorado with people from your church. And I've known people from this church for years. And I also feel like this is a little bit of a homecoming because I was born just down the road in Norman. So, Boomer. Oh, my people. Okay. All right, I don't know what that is, but, we'll cast out demons later. But anyway, so I really feel great being back here in this incredible state. I grew up in Kansas, and my wife and I, we met at Ozark Christian College, which is where I met Matt and Stephanie Thomason. I'm big fans of theirs, and what a blessing they are to your church. And I've gotten to know Chad over the last few years, and he's just incredible. You guys are in such good hands around here, and it's so fun to be with you here today. Right out of college, my wife and I moved and took a position at a church in Kentucky. All right, now Kentucky, I know Chad's a big Kentucky fan, UK, Big Blue Nation, the whole deal. But Kentucky has a lot of stereotypes about it, right? The whole thing about, why do they call it a toothbrush? It was invented in Kentucky because it's just, would have been teeth. But anyway, just that there's a lot of jokes about Kentucky, and I can just tell you, some of you are slow to get that one, but yeah, they're all true. Anyway, I was there for about 9 years, and I loved it. But they always had these great stories that would come out. And I worked at a church where this guy that worked as a doctor in an ER would come in on Sunday mornings, and he always had you won't believe what happened in the ER last night. And these are great stories. They make TV shows out of these stories, right? Well, one day he comes in, he's still laughing about this, and he says, so this guy comes in last night, this is in Kentucky. Guy comes in last night, and he's been in a car accident. And his head's kind of banged up, and so we're kind of taking a look at him. And I noticed that he's got these burn marks around his neck. And I said, sir, if you don't mind me asking, what are the burn marks from? He said, oh, it's got nothing to do with the accident. I said, I know, but tell me what those are. He said, well, it's a long story. Well, that's okay. Go ahead and tell me. We're not going anywhere. So the guy says, well, me and the missus are sitting on the front porch. And that's usually where things get really good, right there, okay? Me and the missus are on the front porch, and we have a dog that roams around the front yard. So we had bought it one of those shock collars. Yeah, you guys see where this is going. Apparently he did not. So he said, we got one of these shock collars, and we put it on our dog. But before we did that, we wanted to know, what's the range on this thing? Because this thing, we've got this remote we can hit. How far can the dog go, and I can still zap it if I need to. And so this is what his wife comes up with. I'll tell you what, honey, why don't you put that collar on? And he said, yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, I'm telling you, you can't make this stuff up. It's Kentucky, right? So anyway, he puts this dog collar on, and he wants to figure out the range on this remote. And so before she ever hits that remote, he says, I'm going to get in the car, and I'm going to drive over the hill, and then when I'm out of range, I'm going to hit the horn. When you hear the horn, you hit the remote. She said, all right. And so he drives over the hill. He gets out of range. He hits the horn. She hits the remote. It knocks him out from the shock, which he passes out. The car rolls down the street into a light pole where he falls on the horn. Yeah, and she just kept hitting that remote, Oh man, Kentucky. You can't make this stuff up. Sorry, Chad. Go Big Blue, right? All right, anyway, you hear those kind of things and you think, man, sometimes people are better together and sometimes they're just not, right? And as we get into this series, let's talk about it. We're going to talk about ways to communicate with each other and ways to make each other better before you end up in an ER in Kentucky, okay? And this is going to be, it's going to be great stuff for not only those of you who are married, but anybody with friends, anybody in a small group, anybody with coworkers, anybody just struggling to kind of relate to people. And all of us are there. In fact, my wife and I, we just recently moved after 20 years out in California at a church out there. We felt the need to get closer back to home and to aging parents, and this church in Texas called us. And so we've been down there for the last 6 months, and I gotta be honest with you, we are empty nesters in a new place, and everything inside of us says, let's just stay at home, watch TV, and know no one. Because it's easier that way, isn't it? I mean, don't some of you feel that way as well? The older you get, it's harder to build friendships. It was a little bit easier when you were in junior high or high school, but now it's just tricky and it's difficult and people have burned you and you've had enough scars from other people in your life and you're like, I don't want any more of this. How do I do this? And then some of us are in that tension of you and your spouse are just trying to figure out how are we gonna do life together, and now we're empty nesters, what do we have in common? Or maybe you've just got a baby at home and you're like, I don't even know if I wanna be in this anyway, this is difficult, this is tough. How are we gonna deal with that? And so I wanna just bring some truth to you that I think will help you. If you have your Bible, you can open up the book of James, and we're gonna hang on to that and look at it here in just a little bit. But I wanna bring this little nugget of wisdom that's, I think, so profound, you're gonna wanna write it down, that I think will help us. And here it is, and that is, men and women are different. Now hang with me, okay? I'll unpack this. This is a tricky statement, but men and women are entirely different. Now, you know that, and there's a part of you that kind of likes that about your spouse, but then you're also like, boy, I really wish you were a little bit more like me. Why can't you be normal like me? Why can't you think like me, right? But men and women are different. And it might surprise you to think about this, but this was intended by God. In fact, take a look at what we read at the very beginning here. It says this in Genesis. So God created people in his own image. God patterned them after himself, male and female. He created them, which means that males are created in God's image and so are females. And so there are things about each of us that are equally valuable to one another and are from the image of God. Job says it this way, in this particular passage, your hand shaped me and made me, which means the differences that you and I have in each other are really created by God. Now let's think about some of those differences, male and female. I mean, obviously, physical structure, we're different from each other. Skeletal structure, body parts, hormones, all those kind of things, different from each other. We're different from each other in the way that we communicate. I mean, studies have been done about how women have about 12,000 more words a day than guys do. All right, and that's why when you get home at the end of the day and you still got stuff to say and your husband's just done, he's out of words, and you got to carry the conversation from then on, because in the morning he'll have more words. Think about the way we communicate with each other as far as just our nonverbals as well. I mean, when a guy sighs, you know what that means? He's just happy with life. When a woman sighs, you know what that means? Someone's an idiot, okay? That's what that means. When a guy says, I have nothing to wear, he means I have nothing clean to wear, okay? When a woman sighs, or when a woman says I have nothing to wear, nothing new to wear, So you see, we just think differently, we communicate differently, and so when we say, let's talk about this, we got to admit, we talk about these things differently. In fact, one of our great philosophers of our day summed it up so well. Take a look at this video.
Today, I took Miss Kate to find some fine cypress logs for my duck blinds.
Where are these logs we're looking for?
Huh?
Where are the logs we're looking
They're on up the creek.
for? This is like being in the pioneer days.
Yeah, I'm guessing she'll do most of the talking.
Doesn't it remind you of back when we were dating back at Black Bow? My daddy had the fishing camp we did.
Yeah.
I was the paddle girl.
Yeah.
And you run me up under those hanging limbs and all those spiders ran over me. Remember that?
Yeah.
Then you remember what happened next?
Yeah. And I act like I'm listening to her, the whole time.
Remember when we went down there and I bought you $100 worth of bait?
Yeah. You remember the time, we were, I was like, yeah, I remember that.
Remember when we were dating and Si had to go with us all the time?
Yeah.
Remember when Si tore up that motor I paid for?
Yeah.
Remember that?
After 50 years, I have learned the art to be oblivious to chatter. I can turn it off and not even hear a word.
We should have brought a picnic.
Hunting logs, Miss Kate.
Brilliant stuff there, brilliant stuff. So obviously, we think differently, we communicate differently, men and women are different, but I want to get even a little bit more specific on that. And I want to talk about the thing that separates really all of us. whether you are married, whether you're single wanting to be married or married wanting to be single. Whatever you are on the spectrum, all of us have these little differences of each other, and that would really come down to our personalities. And some of you are discovering this in your house because you've got multiple people living there, whether it's aging parents or young kids, and you're figuring out, boy, you guys think differently than I do. You are wired differently than I do. I have this theory that every personality is summed up at a four-way stop. Now think about that for a second. 4 cars head to a 4-way stop, you see all 4 personalities. There's one person that's directing traffic. Your turn, then your turn, then your turn. There's another person that is basically just letting everybody else go. Oh, you go, I'll wait, I'm in no hurry. And another guy who's just charging ahead, he's just gonna go. And the other person that's oblivious to everything going on, right? 4 different personalities. And so what I wanna do is I wanna walk through 4 personalities, and this might be a trip back to Psychology 101 for some of you, but I've learned that this is so true in all of our relationships. And I wanna give you kind of the technical term for these 4 things, and then I wanna give you kind of an animal to sum it up, and so we can kind of label each other in a loving way. And then I wanna go to God's word and see what it says about how we're supposed to communicate with one another, okay? So here's the first one, and that is the sanguines. Okay, fancy word, but here's what it means. You're a lot of fun. You're playful, you're upbeat, you're extroverted, you're the life of the party. You never let the facts get in the way of a good story, okay? It's just broad brush, whatever, you're just gonna get the laugh, right? Now there's a fun animal for this, and that is the otter, okay? Playful, rolling around, laughing, having a good time. But here's the problem with the otter. If this is your personality, details don't really matter to you. And so being on time is kind of a relative term. Paying bills is kind of relative, You might have had your lights turned off at some point in your life, right? You just enjoy being around people, but the problem is sometimes you can steal the spotlight from other people and make them feel small. That's the otter. Here's another one, and this is the melancholy. The melancholy are deep, logical thinkers. A to B to C to D. They're organized, they're orderly, they're analytical, they have strong predictability, and they're very, very dependable. They say things like, we're gonna do it the right way, which is my way. Now, some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You were raised by one of these, and that is the bee. Busy as a bee. You are very thorough in what you do, and it's great. You pay the bills, you make everything work, you get people from A to B, you help the family get into the minivan and through the drive-thru and back home. You're crushing it. Here's the problem with the bee. The bee can sting. All right, the bee can hurt sometimes because the bee gets frustrated with everybody else. And sometimes because of their playful nature or their lackadaisical nature, you can kind of be very, very difficult to live with. But we overlook it because the bee is the best personality. That's mine. I'm just kidding. Okay, so anyway, I tend to think Jesus was a bee, but that's another story. I can prove that later. Okay, here's the third one, and this is the choleric, okay? If melancholies think they're right, cholerics know they're right. They are born leaders. They're often dynamic and charismatic. They get the job done. They're not afraid to make the tough call. They love challenges. The tougher the problem, the better. They become presidents and CEOs, and their motto is Nike's motto, just do it. Anybody lean towards this one a little bit, okay? This animal for you, we're gonna go with the lion. You are the lion that roars and tells people what to do, okay? And this is a great, great type of person because they get a lot done and they lead in a great way. But here's the problem. Lions can scare people to death. Lions can make people feel small. Lions can overpower people. Lions can be the loudest person in the room. And lions can often operate in isolation because nobody gets them. All right, anybody uncomfortable yet? Let's get to the last one. And that is the phlegmatic. Sounds like something in the back of your throat, right? The phlegmatic. The phlegmatic is like, let's say Bob Marley, okay? Relaxed. No problem, man. Whatever. You don't have to be the life of the party, but you often are because you're so fun to be around. People love being around you. They love hanging out with you. You may not have come to be the life of the party, but you're going to say that one thing that makes everybody laugh and you're going to steal the show. You're just calm and fun. Let's give you an animal, and that would be the golden retriever. Everybody loves a golden retriever, especially when they're over 2 years old or they're somebody else's, right? The golden retriever, playful, a lot of fun, and everybody loves them, incredibly loyal. But here's the problem with the golden retriever, is they dislike risk. They often shy away from conflict. They're indecisive, and they can be people pleasers as well. Now let's just think about how this plays out when these, kind of intermarry, all right? Let's take the otter and the bee, okay? They're at a party, and the otter says, oh, you're gonna love this. Last Friday night, there was about 6 of us that went out, and the bee goes, it was Saturday. And there were 5 of us. Oh, whatever, there was a bunch of us. No, a bunch would be a dozen. This is kind of the banter, all right? I think I struck a nerve with a few people over here, all right? This is the pain of your relationship. Now, you're great together because, this one pays the bills and the other one provides the life of the party, but, it can be very, very difficult. All right, let's take, for instance, the lion and the bee. The bee says, tomorrow, I'd like us all as a family to go to the lake. And that's all the bee says. Now, the bee has a plan. The plan is we will awake at 8. We will have a leisurely breakfast. Everyone will get cleaned up. We'll go have family pictures first. And then we'll go to the lake where I'll prepare a picnic basket for all of us. The kids will be perfect. We'll all sit by the lake and have a wonderful time. And we'll come home. We'll stop at Target on the way home because I have a few things to pick up. And we'll be home around 4. The lion says nothing but gets up before the break of dawn, blowing the trumpet. All right, it's time to go. The car's running. Let's get in the car right now. And everybody's terrified of this wonderful, relaxing day they're about to have because of the lion, right? That's the pain of these two. Now think about if these two get married, the otter and the golden retriever. They never get anywhere, all right? Yeah. The otter's driving around telling stories and the golden retriever's just happy to be there, right? They're just, what do you want to eat? I don't care. That reminds me of a time, and it's just constantly all over the place. Now, here's the problem. We laugh about this, and it's true, and it's fun when everything's in its good nature, but the reality is that sometimes the bee stings, and sometimes the lion roars, and sometimes the dog bites. And the problem that you and I have with each other is when somebody has been a different personality than you, and eventually you say, I don't like that, so we're just done. I can't handle this anymore. And so I'm not going to get into a small group, or I'm not going to come back to church, or I'm not going to stay in this marriage, or I don't understand this child of mine, so we're finished. Over the course of the next few weeks, you guys are going to walk through how to deal with every single facet of relationships and communication and conflict and all of that. But I want to give you this little kind of starter kit for understanding and communicating with one another. And it's just brilliant. And it comes from the half-brother of Jesus, a guy by the name of James. Now, some of you know this, but we call him the half-brother of Jesus because Jesus and James both shared the same mom in Mary, but Jesus' father was God, and James' father was Joseph, and so we consider them to be half-brothers, but they grew up together. And one of the reasons I actually believe what James said and believe the Bible, because this is in the Bible, is because James was not a believer in Jesus until after the resurrection. Now think about that. What would it take for you to believe that your brother is the Son of God? He would have to come back from the dead. Maybe a couple of times for some of you, right? And Jesus does this, and James he's in. And he spends the rest of his life telling other people about Jesus and how not only just to love Jesus, but to love like Jesus. And in this particular letter that he writes, he gives us such brilliant insight into how to deal with all facets of our relationship. I'm going to read the entire passage and then we're going to zero in and make it practical. Here's what he says. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life God desires. It's almost like James has a couple in his office and he says, here's the way we're going to make this marriage work. And he lays out these 3 specific points. Whatever animal you identify with, and whatever one you are married to, these three things can save your marriage. Whatever animal you have to deal with at the office or in the neighborhood or in your small group, these three things can save your relationships. Here's what he says. The first one's this: everyone should be quick to listen. Now let's stop right there. I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes when my wife are in a season of heated exchange, she's speaking and I'm just waiting to talk. And I am putting together my points. And it's gonna go like it does on Law and Order. And I'm gonna walk it through, and I'm gonna win the argument, and I'm gonna have props and slides and maybe a few character witnesses, okay? And I'm gonna prove my point, because I'm gonna win. That's not listening. Listening is trying to hear what they're saying and why they're saying it. Have you ever been on the outside of an argument listening to two people argue and you think, y'all are saying the same thing? It's just you're not listening to each other. Maybe that's with your kids, maybe that's with your aging parents, maybe it's with some coworkers, and you have to step in and say, this is what they're saying, and translate to one another. And what James is saying is, start by actually listening to what it is they have to say. Now, here's one thing to think about while you're listening. This will change everything. When you're listening, ask yourself this question: is this a problem to be solved or a tension to be managed? Because the odds are we tend to do the opposite. We try to manage problems and solve tensions. And most of the tensions can never be solved. Now, there are some problems that have to be solved. Infidelity, abuse, not taking care of your parental responsibilities, those kind of things. Yeah, you need to lean into that and do something about it. But for the most part, most of the things that you and I deal with are simply tensions to be managed. I've learned this trick with my kids. I have two daughters, 21 and 19. And I've learned, guys, you figured this out by now, that a lot of times when your daughter or your wife is upset, they don't want you to solve their problem. They just want you to listen. And so somebody taught me this, and I've been saying this to my kids when they call me up from college and they're upset about something. And I'll simply say, do you want me to hear or do you want me to help? I just want you to hear me. Okay, I'm all ears. Because that simple distinction between the two goes a long way between a problem to be solved and a tension to be managed. Now, let me tell you the bad news about tensions to be managed in marriages. Psychologists tell us that 70% of the tensions that we have, the things that drive you crazy about your spouse, 70% will never change. Aren't you glad you came to church today? Wasn't that fantastic? Some of you online just turned off. You're done. All right. 70% will never change. Okay, so how do we manage that? Well, James gives us that too. Take a look at what he says next. Everyone should be slow to speak. In other words, you're thinking of something, but wait. Just because it's true doesn't mean it needs to be said right now. Man, there are so many things I have said in the heat of the moment, and I think, it's not that that's wrong, it's just this is the wrong timing. Wait on that till everybody calms down. My wife and I went to this marriage counseling thing years ago, and they gave us this one little idea to think of, and that is when it comes to our anger styles, there's two different types of people, and they tend to marry each other. There's the hailstorm, comes up quick and then blows over, and then there's the snapping turtle that hides in a shell and comes out and rips somebody's head off, right? And what I discovered was I was the snapping turtle and I would just lay in wait, and my wife was the hailstorm, and he gave me this great advice. Listen, the hailstorm needs time to blow over. It takes 40 minutes for adrenaline to calm down. Go for a walk. After I've listened, be slow to speak. Walk away for a little bit. And maybe in your situation, in times of just trying to listen and being slow to speak and you just can't shut it down, write down your little comments and hold them. And then look at them a little bit later and start crossing off the things that you know are not going to be helpful. So ask yourself this: should it be said, and should it be said right now? Take a look at what Proverbs tells us. If you keep your mouth shut, you'll stay out of trouble. It's that simple. If you keep your mouth shut, you'll stay out of trouble. Here's a few things to avoid. Never call names, never helps out. I've learned when I say, that's just like your mother, that doesn't go over real well. I'm just trying to be helpful, right? Never get historical. Don't bring up stuff from 20 years ago or 15 years ago. An old argument's not gonna help a new one. Never say never or always, because it's just not accurate. Well, you never do this. And then what they'll do is, well, there was one time back in '84. Okay, don't do that. And never threaten divorce. The quicker you take divorce off the table, the easier it is to deal with the real problem, which gets us to the last thing he tells us. Everyone should be slow to become angry. Now, I know that we've talked about before that anger is not the sin. It's a natural emotion. It's how we respond to our anger. And anger is always the second emotion. The first one is usually a feeling of hurt or betrayal or frustration. When you are slow to become angry, you have a moment to step back and figure out what the problem really is. And when you and I get angry, we tend to lead with, well, this is just who I am. I'm a lion, or I'm a bee, or I'm Italian, or whatever it is. Back up for just a second and be slow to get angry and figure out what the real problem actually is. Whatever relationship you're in your marriage, dealing with your kids, some of you have every one of these animals represented in your home right now, and you're trying to figure out, how do I deal with every single one of them? Some of you have all of these represented at your office right now, and you're trying to figure out, how do I deal with them? Some of you have certain clients that you're recognizing, oh, that's right, they're a bee. I gotta stop telling them to calm down, and I gotta lean into what it is they're really saying. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry. And in that, we'll be able to get over our problems and figure out what our solutions really are. I read this story a few weeks ago. I thought this was fascinating, but back in the off-season of baseball in 2022, a player for the Philadelphia Phillies, a guy by the name of Trey Turner, signed a massive deal with the Phillies. 11 years, $300 million. Now, there's bigger contracts out there, but the reality is that's a lot of money. And Philly fans have a certain standard. They expect you to earn every penny of it. And so when his season began, the Philadelphia fans were watching him closely with a very skeptical eye of, are you worth it? And his season did not start off very well. He had a lot of strikeouts, he had a lot of fielding errors, he had a lot of problems, and social media began to blow up about Trey Turner not being worth the contract. And every time he'd come up to bat, everybody would boo him over and over again. And it only got worse and worse and worse. Until one day, he cost them the game with a fielding error. And everybody booed him and let him have it. The next day, a guy they referred to as the Philly captain, who's kind of the voice of the Philadelphia fans on social media, he posted a video for all Philly fans. And he said, our boy Trey Turner is in his head. I think we need to help him. What if every time he comes up to bat, instead of us booing him, we give him a standing ovation? And so they did. Trey Turner got up to bat expecting to hear the boos. People rose to their feet and began to applaud him and cheer him on. That game, he hit a big-time RBI for them. The next game, they did the same thing, and he hit the game-winning home run. This continued for the rest of the season, and his manager said he's playing the best baseball of his career. When the season was over, Trey Turner bought billboards all over the city of Philadelphia that just said, thank you. So here's my question for you. Who needs a standing ovation in your life? Who needs you to cheer on who they are, even if they're not like you? Who do you need to emphasize the positive instead of constantly keeping a list of the negative? Maybe that's somebody at work, maybe it's somebody in the neighborhood, but maybe it's someone at home. And the best way you and I are able to move beyond these tensions that we feel and the problems that we have and the differences that we have is if we cheer them on by being quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Let me pray for you. God, I thank you for this incredible church, a church that has led the way for so long in impacting and blessing people. God, I pray your blessing in this congregation and what's next for them. Thank you for the incredible kingdom work that they've done and they will continue to do. God, I pray for every relationship that's represented in here, every household, every office, every neighborhood. And God, I pray that you would give them the wisdom to just take James' words to heart and to be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Thank you for this incredible wisdom from him. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.